Robin, thank you for coming to the podcast.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you. And so you're really fascinating, or your work is really fascinating. And right before we started recording, I was telling you that there's just so many different things that I want to talk to you about, but we don't have all the time in the world, so we'll try to get the most of it. So, but starting from the top, you're an economist professor, right?
Yep.
And I just want to know, like, what actually got you into that? Is that something that you always wanted to do, that you were always interested, or was there something that just sparked that interest?
So a long time ago, I started out as an engineering undergraduate. I
Yeah.
switched to physics as an undergraduate. Then I went to grad school and did philosophy of science. But then I switched back to physics. And then I went off to Silicon Valley for 9 years of computer research
Hmm.
in AI at the time and statistics. Then I went back to grad school to do social science, which was political science and economics. And then I did a postdoc on health policy. And I got here as a professor in 99. Uh, and so I've just been interested in a wide range of things for a long time. And economics allowed me to do a wide range of things and still call it economics. That was, and then, I started out
Hmm.
in physics. You can do a lot of things and call it physics, but most social science you really can't call physics. So I
Yeah.
was drawn more to, as people often are, the older you get, the more you focus maybe on humans and how humans interact as a big limiting factor on many
Right.
things you want to do in the world. And so I followed that path
Hmm.
to, but then once I got tenure, again spread out. I wrote a book on futurism, a book on psychology, people think, and I've been just doing a wide range of things. So I'm more just a general scholar now.
Hmm.
We can talk about whatever subject you want to talk about.
Right. Yeah. It came about the vast interest that you've had in so many different subjects, right? And really figuring out the how it all plays together. Is that what I'm getting?
I've been opportunistic. So I look for what seems the most important thing that I'm near, and when I dig further, I often figure out that something else is even more important, and I pivot to that.
Yeah.
And so I'm just looking for opportunities to do what I'll think of as important neglected work, and
Right.
that's my key heuristic. So I, when other people are not looking at something and it looks important to me, that makes me all the more interested in looking at it,
Mhm.
and I search for important neglected things I can make progress on.
Yeah. So, and I was telling you that I had read the book Freakonomics, and something that I found out about or reading that book was that you could really apply the subject of economics to so many different things. And it's not just like the movement of money, which I thought, I got my degree in finance. Before I got my degree in finance, I thought, when people talked about the economics and just studying that field, it was just, how money works. But something that I found out is that it applies to so many different fields just in life, and you could really understand like human behavior, and you get a little bit of that from economics, right?
Economics is one of our, main intellectual toolkits.
Hmm.
I'm more of a polymath, so
Yeah.
I've spent my life learning many different toolkits.
Hmm.
And one of the things I do perhaps best is when I learn a new area, I notice connections for that new area for all the other toolkits I've learned.
Hmm.
And so the more toolkits I've mastered, the more connections I can find with each new topic I look at. So economics is a powerful toolkit,
Hmm.
uh, but there are many other powerful toolkits out there. And I have specialized in looking for neglected
Yeah.
areas, which are often ways in which one toolkit could apply to something else where
Hmm.
people haven't noticed that. So, but we could go through that in some more specific area of interest.
Yeah. So one of the fascinating things that I read was like even someone's name. Uh, could uh how do I say this? Like someone's name could uh influence the success they have in life, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there was this fascinating story that I read that there was this two brothers. One was named Winner. The other one was named Loser. And
Okay.
the one that was named, I think those were the names. The one that was named Loser actually became a success, and the child was named a Winner. He ended
Okay.
up like having like a life in prison and all of that. And I mean, that was just really fascinating. And so even when it comes to someone's name, it really influences the success that they have in life, but sometimes not the way that you may think. And see, this is where like I really like digging into things, and that's just one aspect that I wanted to talk to you about. But another thing is evolution and behavior, and how over time the behavior that people have is due to certain certain reasons that they do things, right? And what are you, how do I put this? What have you really I lost my train of thought. I don't know if you want to pick up from where I left
Well,
off.
you might be referring to this book I have called The Elephant in the Brain: Hidden Motives in Everyday Life,
Yeah.
which is about how we're often wrong about our motives. So we're going around the world all the time doing things. And for each thing we do, if somebody were to ask why we're doing it, we have stories
Yeah.
to explain our motives for what we're doing. But those motives are often just wrong. They aren't really why we're doing things. And we often don't realize that we aren't very honest about our motives. So that makes it harder to understand yourself if you don't know why you're doing things. You might
Yeah.
think it's a bit of a puzzle. Why don't we know why we're doing what we're doing? But it does seem like the stories we tell are more stories that present ourselves well, or at least present ourselves as acceptable compared to our actual motives.
Yeah. And what do you think that is?
Because your conscious mind
Yeah.
isn't in charge of you. It's more like a press secretary. Its job is to defend you, to
Right.
put a good spin on you. So if you think about a press secretary of the president or some company, their job isn't to know what really goes on in the company.
Right.
Their job is to spin whatever the company does and try to make it seem acceptable and even noble to outsiders. That's what your conscious mind is for.
Yeah.
That's why you don't know what you're doing. But the stories you come up with are better stories, the best stories you think you can find for why you're a good person, why people should accept what you're doing, why you aren't violating any key rules or norms. That's the story you're trying to spin with your conscious mind. But you have a deep mind inside you that's mostly opaque to you, and it's
Yeah.
making a lot of big decisions. And then you tell yourself you made those decisions, but in fact, you didn't. Your conscious mind is more making excuses for them.
Right. So sometimes, and I see this a lot. If someone is questioned, and they're questioned on like why they did something, they may lie, but in their conscious mind, they might think that they did it for a different motive. Is that what I'm getting?
The motive that's in their conscious mind that they tell you, they're being sincere in the sense that the thing that's in their head is the thing they're telling you. The thing that's in their head is just not true.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the problem. But that's they're being sincere about it as a way to persuade you. That is, you're looking for cues of insincerity and you don't see those. And
Hmm.
that what makes you more willing to believe what they say. So the way we figure out what people's real motives are is to look at the details in the patterns of their behavior.
Hmm.
So, for example, one of our chapters is about school.
Right.
And the question is, why do people go to school?
Yeah.
And if you ask people in school why they're going to school, they will tell you typically, well, they're learning some material, and
Mm.
that material they learn will be useful somehow later in life, either directly or for skills acquired through it. That's the
Right.
usual story people will tell you about why they're going to school. But
Uh-huh.
if we look at what actually happens, we find that people actually don't remember very much of what they learned in school.
Yeah.
And the stuff they remember isn't actually very useful,
Hmm.
which suggests they can't really be going to school to learn useful stuff because they're not learning useful stuff.
So do you think some of that may be due to social influence, and we see that a lot in people being told to do certain things because that's the acceptable way to do it, like
Well,
say for school
your
example.
subconscious mind is looking for a good
Hmm.
story and it's going to pick the story that it thinks sounds good to your
Hmm.
audience. So,
Yeah.
yes, when there's a story that people have accepted as a good story, then it's likely to pick that.
Mm.
So this is an acceptable story for school that you are learning useful material.
Oh,
But
okay.
when we look at the details, what we find is more plausibly you are showing off how
Yeah.
smart, conscientious, conformist you are. And these are useful features of employees.
Hmm.
So employers would like to know who's smart and conscientious and conformist. And by doing well at school, you show that you have those features. And that's why you're going
Mm.
to school. But that doesn't sound as good as a reason.
Right.
So you pick another reason. Another
Mm.
example is that why do you go to the doctor? Why do you go to the hospital? If you
Mm.
ask somebody who's at the doctor or the hospital why they are there, they will say, well, they are wanting to get well or to stay well.
Yeah.
That's why they're there, because that's a good reason we give for going to the doctor or hospital. But when we look at the data, we find that when we randomly induce some people to go to the doctor more
Yeah.
by giving them a lower price, they're not any healthier.
Mm. So
So that can't be why they're actually going to the doctor.
so you would say that so sometimes the motives are also influenced by what they believe to be better.
Well, the things they tell you are their
Mm.
motives
Mm.
are based on what they think will sound good.
Mm.
But that's just not the same as their actual motives.
So is that what we're actually seeing when people protest? Because they form, say, a collective to go protest a certain cause,
Right?
and
But
some,
why? So
yeah.
the reason they will give you is that they are trying to make a better world, a better city, whatever,
Mhm.
by doing their protest. That's the explanation they will offer to you. That's what sounds good. But we
Mhm.
have to look at the details of their behavior to try to figure out what they're really doing. Why are they really there?
Mm.
And for political behavior like that, a better explanation is they're showing loyalty to their associates.
Right.
Individuals can't very much influence the course of political events. That's way too hard for individuals to do.
Yeah.
But what individuals can do is reassure their associates that they are loyal to their teams.
So we see a lot of that in politics, right? When you have two
Right?
parties and the members of those parties like to be loyal to their team, which is basically a lot of tribalism, and we see a lot of opposition against the other party because they like feeling like they belong to something, and then the motives of that specific party
Right?
influences an individual's actions to do certain things.
So if you ask people who they are willing to discriminate against, politics is one of the strongest features they're willing to discriminate against. People do not want to date people from the other side of the political spectrum. They do not want to give scholarships that would be received by the other side of the political spectrum. They do not want to live in a neighborhood with other people. They feel entitled to discriminate strongly against people who don't share their politics.
Hmm.
And that shows their associates that they're loyal to their side.
Yeah. So
And people care about that. People want to have loyal associates.
so is that due to the need of people wanting to belong to something?
Well, it's not just needing a feeling of that is
Uh huh.
people actually concretely coordinate to favor their groups.
Hmm.
So people want to hire, people for jobs that are in their groups. They want to
Hmm.
date people in their groups. They want to buy things from people in their groups. They do concrete things that benefit people in their groups, and
Hmm.
that but only loyal members of their groups. So they each want to be loyal so they can get these benefits of being in the group.
Yeah, and it goes back to the motive. So now you have people that feel like they need to share a certain motive, but it's all surface level because once they're a part of a group and that specific group has certain motives and you have individuals practicing those certain motives and the reason for doing so, but they don't really understand the motives at a surface or like a at a deep level. It's all basically external. Like they want to appear like they're good because they believe that what they're doing is good,
Right.
right?
So, as you might know, many kinds of discrimination in our world
Hmm.
today are looked down on and disapproved of.
Hmm.
Discrimination on, say, gender or race or age. But political discrimination, people are eagerly to admit and to do it. They're happily
Hmm.
discriminating on the basis of politics. So
Yeah.
that's one of the few legitimate kinds of discrimination people accept is to discriminate on the basis of politics.
Right. And I think it goes further than just politics now because a lot of the discrimination is looked down upon especially when it comes to, um, I would say, like gender, ethnicity. They like to, I mean, at least I've noticed that some people like to find loopholes in discriminating against certain types of groups, but for a different issue or like on a different
Well,
reason.
because political discrimination is acceptable, all you have to
Mhm.
do is find how the people you don't like are politically wrong, and then you can feel comfortable discriminating against them.
Yeah, even though when you dive deep into the reasoning for the discrimination, it goes back to what they're trying to hide, and and I would say that's part of the having a motive, but you're conscious believing that it's a different motive, even though you have like a deeper motive than what you're showing, right?
So we were designed to not see these things. That
Mm-hmm.
is, these are blind spots. We were
Mm-hmm.
designed not to see these blind spots. So plausibly, I'm doing you a disservice by showing them to you.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if you weren't supposed to see this and I show it to you, now you see it, that could put you at a disadvantage.
Mm.
But you might just be generally curious and you might be someone who specializes in thinking about policy or social science.
Right.
And so then I'd say, even if it's a disadvantage personally, it's your job to understand the social world. So you need to understand this. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
people who do policy about school or about medicine, they can get policy very wrong. They make wrong assumptions about what people's motives there are,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
politics as well. So, people who specialize in studying these areas, it's important that they understand what's really going on, even if it puts them at a personal disadvantage to so understand.
Well, that's really interesting. And I mean, it just sucks that we have this entire discourse, especially when it comes to politics, that it's just so divided that you have two different groups that they just want to belong to those different groups, and you come down to motive. But like, where does that really come from? Like, has that always been a human factor, and it just turns out, or it just plays out as politics? Does it go deeper than that?
We are social animals,
Mm-hmm.
and social animals have long formed groups, formed
Mm-hmm.
teams. And a big part of forming teams is to monitor the boundary of the team, who's in versus out,
Mm-hmm.
and then to make sure that people are favoring their teams. And
Mm.
that's just how groups go for a very long time. You're supposed to show which teams you're part of and then favor your team members, your teammates over outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's now when some kinds of teams become illicit, then we focus on other ones. But we've always wanted to have some kind of team that we could favor in order to be loyal.
Mm. And do you think that like the media has acknowledged um, this motive of belonging to a different team, and they basically just ran on it?
Well, so in general, these hidden motives, we are
Mm.
more willing to find them and see them in our rivals
Oh,
than in
okay.
ourselves.
Yeah.
So the other political party, you're happy
Mm.
to point out they're being tribal,
Yeah.
but not your own. So
Mm.
your own is interested in that in the welfare of the world, and you're just a good person trying to make the world better. But those people, they are tribal.
Mhm. Which is funny because like that applies to both groups, both political parties. They just believe that they just want to make the world better, but like when it comes to down to like their motive is wanting the best, say for the country. They just have different ways to go about it, and they think that the other side is evil, and so that comes from that motive of belonging to a tribe. And like where do you see this going from here? Because we.
It's just probably going to continue indefinitely.
Mhm.
Um, but the focus on politics is more the change over the last half century or so.
Mhm.
We have come to more focus on politics as our main axis of disagreement compared to other axes of disagreement or difference.
Mhm.
And the question is, how far can that go? So political polarization has been increasing, especially in the United States. And
Mhm.
I think it's part of the general tendency in long periods of peace and prosperity. So
Mhm.
up until World War One, Europe had experienced a long period of peace and prosperity, so had the United States. And as a result, they had become more unequal and more polarized
Yeah.
because when conflicts with outsiders fade into the past and you don't remember them and they don't seem as important, you focus more on conflicts with insiders, other people who are local. And that's
Mhm.
what's happened in the West in the last, you know, half century or so. The longer we go from World War II or the Cold War, the less we feel threatened by outsiders and the more we focus on the inside conflicts. And so
Mm.
that will continue until we have a big outside conflict, which I hope doesn't happen, but that's history. So basically,
Yeah.
there are a number of say inequality in history typically just rises until we have a big crisis like a civil war or a pandemic or something, and then it falls.
Yeah.
And that's just been the history of inequality. We've had high inequality lately because we've had a long period of peace and prosperity.
Yeah.
And the way that will likely fall is by having a period of conflict with
Mhm.
with less peace and prosperity, which is a bad thing to have happen. So I don't wish it to happen, but
Yeah.
that's the likely way in which our period of peace and prosperity will end.
Mhm.
And therefore, the rise in polarization and inequality will end when we start having a lot more conflicts.
Which is funny because after COVID, I feel like the country became even more divided. And COVID,
Indeed.
yeah, COVID was a outside threat, right?
But it wasn't a people outside.
Mm.
If it had been people outside, that would have
Mm.
had a very different effect. But it wasn't, people don't think of it as being caused on purpose by somebody.
Mm.
And they actually used it as a way to divide themselves,
Yeah.
argue about masks and lockdowns and
Right.
origins. So, yes, it doesn't seem like it also wasn't anybody getting fired. So, I don't know if you
Mm.
know, in the United States at the beginning of World War II,
Right.
we were losing.
Hmm.
We were consistently losing for about a year. Our battles were going badly. We
Yeah.
were everything was just going badly. And then the leaders said, we need to change a bunch of stuff or we're going to lose here. and they made some pretty big changes in who was in charge of what and what sort of instructions they were given. And then we
Hmm.
started to do better and not lose. But
Yeah.
in order to be ready to fire lots of people and change things, you have to actually be scared that things are going badly. Nobody got fired in COVID.
Hmm. Yeah.
Nobody was seen as, it wasn't seen as being so bad that somebody should be fired. We just
Yeah.
decided, oh, this is okay. We're going to do something, but we're not going to blame anybody and not going to fire people. We're not going to change how we do things.
Mm.
And that also happened at 9/11, actually.
Yeah.
9/11 was this big crisis, and we tried to do things to change, but we didn't really fire anybody.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
didn't say you guys have been doing a really bad job and you're gone and we need somebody in here to do something different. We didn't really do that. We just sort of kept doing the same things without
Yeah.
firing anybody. So that's a sign that we weren't that scared.
Yeah.
In World War II, again, we were scared. After a year of losing in World War II, we were really worried that this is going badly. And if we don't change, this is going to end up very badly. And that's what makes us willing to change. But we didn't do that in 9/11 or after or during COVID.
Mm. So, as bad as it sounds, we would probably need something like World War II to happen again for it to bring us together.
Well, we might need something bigger to make us willing to change things. And yes, a destructive war is what brings people together and reduces inequality,
Mm.
unfortunately, which is why maybe you shouldn't hope that we get to be more equal. We get brought together because it's a very high price to pay to be brought together. You
Yeah.
need a pretty destructive external threat.
Yeah. Which, as bad as it sounds, I mean, that's probably what we need, but it's like it's something really bad to wish for. But I mean,
Indeed.
although 9/11 brought us together temporarily, I mean, it faded pretty quick, but there
Right.
was a time of prosperity that we felt like American.
We were brought more together, but we didn't blame anybody enough to fire them.
Mm, yeah.
We didn't say that anybody inside us was doing stuff wrong and they needed to change how they were doing stuff.
Yeah.
We just took all the usual authorities and let them stay in charge and let them decide what to do.
So it would have to be something that was brought about because of incompetence.
You have to be scared,
Yeah.
actually scared that we might be doing it badly. And we haven't had that in a while because we're so
Mhm.
rich and peaceful and prosperous.
Yeah.
So the modern world is really quite rich and comfortable. And so
Mhm.
we're not very scared, but that means we aren't willing to make big changes either.
Yeah. And
You have to be scared of, things going badly to be willing to make big changes.
right. So I have another question regarding that. Is is living through a good time responsible for weakening a society?
Um, in a way, I think. So humanity's superpower is cultural evolution.
Right.
That's the way we're able to do things better than the other animals, is because we can inherit culture much faster and change it much faster than
Mhm.
animals can change their DNA.
Yeah.
Up until a few centuries ago, we had a pretty healthy environment for cultural evolution because most people lived in small peasant communities. There were
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of them in the world.
Yeah.
They were near the edge of survival, facing strong selection pressures. The world was changing slowly, and they were trying to be very conservative. That's a healthy environment for cultural evolution.
Hmm.
Then in the last few centuries, we've changed these parameters a lot. Instead of hundreds of thousands of peasant cultures, we crushed that down to 100 nations and then now into one world monoculture. So variety is way down.
Hmm.
As we get rich and comfortable, selection pressures are way down. Uh, the rates of change have gone way up because of technology and business improvement. And we are now eager to cause cultural change. So this is a
Hmm.
bad environment for cultural evolution.
Yeah.
So plausibly, our culture is drifting into maladaption.
Hmm.
And that's related to our being rich, but it's more specific. It's about us breaking our superpower. this process of cultural evolution, we broke it, and now it's not working. So if we had if these parameters weren't all in the bad range,
Hmm.
we could well have a healthy evolution even if we're rich. But since these parameters are not in the good range, we are drifting into maladaptation.
Wow. No, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Uh, because when it comes to making like a society stronger, and then when it comes to making a society weaker, uh, uh, it there's also a correlation with birth rates, right? That during good times, births tend to trend higher, but during bad times, births tend to trend lower. Is that true?
Um, we know about many correlates of fertility. There
Hmm.
does seem to be an overall correlation with wealth, but if you look in more detail, it seems like there are other more specific causes that we can focus on. But it does seem like when you look for the primary causes of fertility decline,
Yeah.
they are mostly cultural.
Mm.
Gender equality, increasing years of education, less grandparent involvement, higher standards for parental care and intensive parenting, uh, moving from a cornerstone to capstone marriage norms.
Yeah.
Uh, these are all cultural trends that have contributed to declining fertility. Also, declining religion, more urbanity. There is an overall correlation with wealth, but we can understand more specifically what are the particular drivers.
Hmm. Yeah, because from what I've came across is that there may be some psychological reasons for the fertility rates that we just don't consciously think about, because when times are good, fertility rates tend to go up, and when times are bad, fertility rates tend to go down. But it's not only the cultural behaviors, but also the psychological behaviors of how we're feeling. Is there any truth
Well,
to
you,
that?
you call it psychology, but it looks like culture to me.
Hmm.
You look at somebody doing something and having a feeling, and you want to call that psychology, but culture is in charge of feelings.
Mm.
The feelings you have are greatly determined by your culture. Different peoples in different cultures have different feelings.
Mm.
Uh, Culture tells you what are the feelings that are important, which ones are legitimate, when you should be outraged, when you should be proud. Culture tells you what to feel.
Wow. Okay. So does that mean that also that different cultures react to stressors differently?
Of course, yes.
And
So culture humans are quite culturally plastic. That's why cultural evolution has been so powerful.
mhm,
If we only had a limited range of how cultures could change us, then we couldn't change as much as we have.
yeah,
People today are different than people were a million years ago,
mhm,
quite different, and it's culture that is the main thing that has changed in order to make us different.
right. Because as humans
Now,
evolve, also culture does, right?
culture is the main way humans evolve. There isn't another one. DNA is very slow and
Hmm.
it doesn't change as much. So the main way humans have changed is culture.
Yeah, and that's the difference between nature and nurture, right? Because you know, when a baby is born, it's in their nature to cry for over different things, but as they grow old, they start to get influenced by their own culture, and that influences their behavior. So that's like the difference
Right. But
between.
babies very quickly
Mhm.
learn culture from their parents. It doesn't take very long. So even the way babies and parents interact is very much influenced by culture.
Mm.
The
So
parents are obviously strongly influenced by culture, and they quickly teach the baby how to be a baby in their culture.
So how fast would you say that takes for a baby to start catching on to their own culture?
It's within a few months.
So that actually, so they start to get it as, I mean, before they're even able to talk, right? They
I mean,
understand like their
for,
culture.
the babies are watching their mother, say, and parents for whether the parents are anxious or feel secure or
Hmm.
tired, which when they're happy, when they're sad, what they approve and disapprove of. The
Hmm.
baby is very eagerly learning about the parents' attitudes and feelings about things, and those parents are sharing their culture. That's where the parents get all these feelings that they're sharing with the kids is from the
Hmm.
culture. So the baby is very quickly learning which kinds of things the parents accept and don't accept, which kinds of behaviors is okay or not, when they might get food, how they can get attention, how they can make complaints, whether it's, what happens when you pull the cat's tail.
Hmm.
All these things they're very quickly learning from their parents, and those parents have learned that from their cultures. So children are quite quickly learning about their culture. So children in different societies are, in fact, different. Children in different cultures
Wow.
grow up differently and have different
Hmm.
experiences as children because the cultures are different.
Because it takes just like a few months for their personalities to form, right? And it's like the very first months of a baby's age is really critical in the person that they will become. And I've thought that it could be a lot of genetics, but you're saying that the culture
I
has a
mean,
lot of influence.
genes are also in humans, and
Mm-hmm.
some of what we are is determined by genes, but genes just can't change very fast
Mm-hmm.
or be different in different contexts very much. So genes are mostly determining the stuff about humans that's constant across time, relatively constant across space and location. The stuff that changes rapidly across space and time,
Mm-hmm.
that's driven by culture.
Wow. And so, how fast does culture change? Because can't culture change within one generation, right?
It, in fact, does. So, in the last century, our main world culture has become eager for cultural change. That is, our biggest heroes are cultural activists who
Mm-hmm.
seek out and try to cause cultural change, and the winners of those cultural fights are seen as our biggest heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And most cultural, much of cultural change in the last century is caused by youth movements,
Mm-hmm.
and which was caused by high school and college. So before high school and college, most kids, when they turned 14, they went off to work and they mixed in with adults and they did
Yeah.
not form a separate teen culture or a
Mm.
separate college culture. Young people would go off to work and try to assimilate to the local work culture of the place they started working at. That's
Mm.
what happened up until 1900. And around 1900, we started having most people go to high school. And what that meant is these same teenagers were all together and they formed their own youth culture.
Mm-hmm.
And those youth cultures quite often got it into their head that they wanted to cause cultural change, and they had an activist program of something they wanted to change in the world.
Yeah.
And in fact, I asked like ChatGPT to do a survey of
Uh-huh.
100 times when young people and old people had some conflict, and that was more than 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and to say in the long run which side won between the conflict between the young and the old. And it
Mm-hmm.
said 97 times the young people won, once the old people won, and the other 2 times it was a tie.
Mm.
So
So,
young people consistently win their bids to cause cultural change. And so we have seen high levels of cultural change in the last century because
yeah.
of youth cultures having pushing for cultural activist movements, and they succeed consistently. As we've had high levels of cultural change because of that.
So, is that due also to like fresh ideas and old people being stuck in their ways and not wanting to change their ideas? And something that you just can't get away with or get away from is that ideas will change. And if you don't change, you're basically going to be taking over the ideas that are going to change because it's just a matter of time before
So
it
there's
change.
several issues here.
Yeah.
One is innovation and change is only good when it tracks something adaptive or
Hmm.
valuable.
Right.
Random change isn't good.
Yeah.
It's change that tracks this. So when we have new technology and then we change to adopt it,
Hmm.
and we can see that the new technology is in fact more cost effective than the old one,
Hmm.
then over time that's good change. But a lot of cultural change is just change for the sake of change
Yeah.
without obviously tracking some metric of value.
Hmm.
And up until a century ago, most of the world's cultures were conservative and trying not to change exactly because
Hmm.
they didn't think they could see very well what changes would be better.
Yeah.
And then we decided we were going to celebrate cultural change, even if we couldn't see what changes were better. We were just going to eagerly cause change. And that's how
Hmm.
the world's been for the last century. High levels of cultural change, but not very tracking fundamental adaptive or value, cost effective parameters. We were
Right.
just making big changes.
Because you do talk about the value of change, but we have to keep in mind that different people value different things differently. So what might find value in, you might find a higher cost in. So sometimes random change might happen because it may be valuable to some people and then it may
I'd
be
say
costly to others.
most of these youth movement caused cultural changes in the last centuries have not been tracking fundamental adaptive value. They are
Hmm.
not making our cultures more effective. They are
Hmm.
just changing because people want to be different. That's the idea of
Yeah.
fashion. So, fashion is the idea that you want to be on the front of the fashion change.
Right.
And for that, the fashion doesn't have to be better. It just has to
Hmm.
be different. So what
Uh,
we have is just a lot of fashion change.
yeah.
In addition to we do have fundamental technical change and learning of business practices, and those changes are tracking cost effectiveness. That is when
Hmm.
a new firm shows up with a better product and it gets more customers and it finds ways to make it cheaper. Those are changes that accumulate and are
Hmm.
better in the long run. But changes that are just caused by some set of teenagers all deciding they want something to be different, that doesn't usually track
Hmm.
some fundamental deeper value.
Right. But it still happens, right? Because we,
Yes, and it's
yeah.
a problem.
Yeah.
It is happening.
Hmm. Yeah. And it goes back to like, it would be a problem to who? Do you think that sometimes there may be a group of people that find value in a change, but once that change comes along, it may actually be costly to that group and they might.
So if you survey people,
Mhm.
most people think culture is changing too much.
Mhm.
Old people think it especially, but on average, most people think we are changing things too much.
Mhm.
But the young people who drive the change, they don't care.
Right.
They want change and they cause it and they get it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, we see that mostly in politics, but you also mentioned fashion. Social media may be something else now that people have easier access to the lives of others, but they have access to this basically highlight reel of somebody's best moments, and they want to have that change influence on them, and then that causes like depression and all of that because they realize that they just can't really do much to affect change in their own lives. And that's actually something that they might find value in changing, but they come to realize that it's actually costlier to them because they just can't, like, they don't have any control over the change.
So there's we can think of changes in means and changes in ends.
Okay.
Changes in means are changes in how to do something to achieve an end that you're holding constant.
Hmm.
So typically when we change our means, we make it more we can more effectively achieve an end.
Hmm.
And that's adaptive change. That's good. But we also just change our ends. We change our goals,
Hmm.
what we value and what we disapprove or approve of, and what we find high status. We're changing those too. And those tend to be more maladaptive changes because
Hmm.
it's much harder to decide which one of those are good or bad.
Hmm.
So that's our key problem. I think we must be running out of time here according to your time schedule.
No, yeah, we're running out of time, but yeah, it's just a, like, evolution is really fascinating, and I mean, I'm fascinated by the entire thing of like where we've came from and where do we go now. But I mean, like, this conversation could just keep on going and going and going, and it just could go in so many different ways. But thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate having this conversation. Although it was a pretty quick conversation, but you know, we do have the time constraint. But
Okay.
thank you, and
Well, hope you have a good rest of your day.
thank you. And before you go, like, where can people find more about your work?
I am Robin Hanson. You can find out more about me at hanson.gmu.edu. You could also find me on Twitter at Robin Hanson. So, some of us are lucky in that when you search for our name, we're the first person who comes up. So then you don't have
Mhm.
to search very far for us. So I happen to be lucky in that I'm the most prominent Robin Hanson you will find when you search.
Well, great. Well, thank you for coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.